Okay, so this video is meant to help you a little bit with the questions on the electrochemical cells experiment. As you know, you've already gone through and done the reactions, and so as you turn to the questions page, you should hopefully have completed every reaction for number 2A. And again, looking at their theoretical voltages. So let's start out just talking a little bit about number 1 and what that's going to mean for some of the other areas of this lab. As you look through why all the voltages are experimentally going to be positive values, keep in mind that we're talking about electrochemical, also known as voltaic cells. So the fact that these are voltaic means that they have to be spontaneous. That's going to help by knowing what that sign is. And remember, too, that once you know the sign of E, it's going to be related to the sign of delta G. And once you know the sign of delta G, that's also related to the value of K for your equilibrium constant. So all of these are related to each other. 2B, as you start to consider what might be differences about the theoretical values in which you saw experimentally, keep in mind that theoretical values are based on standard conditions. The standard conditions are going to be including things such as 25 degrees Celsius to kind of go along with the thermodynamic data table. It's going to be run at an experimental pressure of 1 atmosphere. In addition to that, every single gas that's present has to also be 1 atmosphere in terms of its partial pressure. And finally, every single aqueous solution has to have a concentration that is 1 molar. So as you look through your data, that might help kind of just create an answer as to why you might have some differences. And of course, there are a number of other reasons beyond that. All right, question 3. I did in fact use the same YouTube. And the YouTube, the thing that you want to also consider is, again, the purpose of that YouTube is to end up creating the salt bridge. In that salt bridge, you want to be able to have ions coming out into the solution. So in one side, you're going to have the positive ions flowing into the solution. And on the other side, that salt bridge is going to be releasing negative ions into the solution. By no means is a concentration specific, nor does a change in concentration really affect the voltage. But do be sure to answer what happens when the salt bridge no longer has a salt in it. Okay, so that helps you with questions 3 and 4. Question 5. Now you want to start to think about what's happening with respect to Le Chatelier's principle. Since I'm asking you about Le Chatelier's principle, both Seiler and I would like to see you either discuss the rates, forward and reverse, or talk about the value of Q versus K. Again, those are the 2 key ways of explaining with an essay how changes are occurring with Le Chatelier's principle. As you take a look at part C, and let me scroll up for that, keep in mind that you are talking about putting in just a larger piece of copper. So in part C, we're talking about changing what the electrode looks like. And as you look at your balanced reaction, keep in mind that that means that we're changing the solid copper. So what might be happening there? Part D is twofold. You're going to first talk about the ammonia to the copper solution, and second, talk about the sodium sulfide to the zinc solution. Please speak about each of these separately. Number 2, you want to keep in mind that because you're adding the copper ions with the ammonia, you actually have a side reaction occurring. This is a great opportunity to review the fact that ammonia molecules having an extra pair of electrons on the nitrogen can act as a ligand, also known as a Lewis base. Copper then can pick up that ligand, and it ends up picking up 4 of them as a complex ion. If you don't remember complex ions, be sure to go back and look at the Chatelier lab. So in the copper half cell, this reaction is taking place as a side reaction, which then alters what's occurring to the voltage. As far as the zinc solution with the sulfur, it will be in fact sulfide ions joining with the zinc, and hopefully you caught the very dark black sort of colored, sort of gray black depending on where you're looking in the solution, and also a super odorous formation of the solid as we create zinc sulfide. Again, this is a side reaction to the reaction of the copper and zinc cell. So use these side reactions to answer Le Chatelier's principle about how each of these additions affected what occurred to the voltage. All right, last, actually number 6, right? We are talking about looking at hydrogen as a half cell and also using it as a reference cell. This corresponds to what we had been talking about with respect to hydrogen here on our table. Again, because hydrogen is used as our reference cell, it's given a value of 0. So every single cell potential along this table is in fact relative to the hydrogen half reaction. As you go and you answer this question on number 6, you want to be considering what would happen if we changed the relativity. Each of these half cell potentials is in fact relative to what? Are any of them absolute? Probably not. So you want to get just sort of a sense of what would happen if you change substances in terms of that particular reduction potentials table. Finally, in question 7, this goes along with your notes. And so if you remember, under voltaic cells, there was a video describing how to determine which of the half cells, and in this case it'll be between zinc and bromine, will in fact be oxidized versus that which is reduced. You will of course notice that you do have bromine, which remember cannot be a solid. So what solid would make a very good electrode for this? So keep that in mind. Also remember, bromine can be soluble in water, and because bromine is slightly soluble in water, where are you going to find it with respect to your drawing of the voltaic cell? Finally, as you answer this question, part D, keep in mind again that you are using Le Chatelier's principle. So if we know that heat is being evolved, you do know that this is an exothermic reaction. And again, your choices would be, can you talk about the rates in the forward and reverse, or talk about Q versus the new K, and be able to explain what ends up happening to those voltages. If you have a solid understanding of how Le Chatelier's principle is affecting what's occurring here, you're going to have a much easier time also with the next section, which will be on the Nernst equation.